I'm going to try to make this somewhat participatory, but the unfortunate thing is that I haven't taught for a year and a half. I haven't had a tie on for a year and a half. And so I always had a tendency to overplan, and I know I've overplanned. The problem with the overplanning this session is that it really reaches a crescendo, a punch right at the end. So I'm going to really try to make it there. So if I start out with more participation than I end up with, I hope you'll forgive me for that. And I do want to engage in some questions and some conversation. So if you'll also just try to be as brief and concise as possible so that we can move through this. So we are meeting in the middle of Yom Kippur, and just in a nutshell, what is Yom Kippur all about? What's the main idea, our main task, the main theme of the day? And I'm going to have Eileen will call on people because she's watching who's raising their hands and things.
Liz.
Unmute yourself, Liz.
Yeah, you got to unmute there.
Mortality.
Okay, and how does that get thrust upon us? And what is the day used to thrust our mortality upon us?
Well, I mean, traditionally wearing a kittel, the shroud that we'll be buried in, the emphasis on, repairing ourselves and repenting.
Okay, so let's focus on that then, because that certainly is a theme throughout the day in our liturgy, is the idea of repentance, and really today is all about, with mortality in mind, is all about trying to figure out how can I postpone that as much as possible, and how can I enhance the time that I have until such time as my time is up. And so it's about teshuvah. And we categorize two different main categories of sins that we think about on this day. And it has to do with our relationships between us and God, being Adam leMakom, and between us and other people, Adam leChavero. So it's all about those relationships. Now today I've chosen to talk about the book of Job, and the themes, these categories of Yom Kippur, find parallel in the themes of the book of Job. In the Job, there are two major issues: relationships between God and human beings, and between people. And Job raises questions about what makes for healthy relationships. So we're going to start by commenting about and understanding Job's place in the theological narrative of the Bible. The Bible has a basic idea, and Yom Kippur is largely built on this foundation. There is a covenant with God, and God expects a lot out of us. If we obey, good things will happen. We'll prosper, we'll have lots of children around, the weather will be good, all good things and blessings. If we disobey, bad things, bad health, enemies will destroy us, we'll lose our wealth. Much of the Torah, especially Leviticus and Deuteronomy, has this basic theology: obey God, that is the way to success and blessings. And then come the period of the prophets. Already the temple has been around for a while, and the prophets come to challenge the Torah, the theory that is so foundational in the Torah. So you think about a lot about the prophets. I always have in mind when I think of this, Jeremiah chapter 7, we're not going to take a look at it, but he's at the city gates and he sees people coming and going into the temple, and they have an agenda. They want God to be happy with them. So they're going through all of the rituals that they're supposed to go through that will make God happy. And Jeremiah rebukes them. That's not going to work, he says. Your rituals are meaningless, because all you're thinking about is your business and the next deal you're going to make. So they challenge the idea that by worshiping God and praising God, you will be protected by God. A very clear example was this morning's haftarah from the book of Isaiah, chapter 58. And we're going to take a look at that. And what I'd like to do is have somebody start by reading with a good clear voice verses 1 through 3. This was our Haftarah this morning.
Gordon, can I ask you to unmute and read those for us, please?
Cry with a full throat, without restraint. Raise your voice like a ram's horn. Declare to my people their transgression, to the house of Jacob their sin. To be sure, they seek me daily, eager to learn my ways, like a nation that does what is right, that has not abandoned the laws of its God. They ask me for the right way. They are eager for the nearness of God. Why, when we fasted, did you not see? When we starved our bodies, did you pay no heed? Because on your fast day...
Wait, let's stop there. Thank you, Gordon. So what are the people complaining about? That's a question. You can raise your hand. What are they complaining about?
I see Steve and Mary.
They think they're doing what they were told they're supposed to do, and it's not working.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you. We followed the rituals. How come God's not happy? And the prophet answers them with verses 4 and 5. So somebody read verses 4 and 5. The answer to the question.
Felicity, will you read 4 and 5 for us, please?
Because you fast in strife and contention, and you strike with a wicked fist. Your fasting today is not such as to make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast I desire, a day for men to starve their bodies? Is it bowing the head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast? A day when the Lord is favorable?
So here they're saying, look, there's nothing wrong with the rituals, but with the people that are performing them. They don't understand what it is that God really wants. And that we see in verses 6 and 7. So can we have somebody read verses 6 and 7?
Steve, will you read 6 and 7, please?
Sure. No, this is the fast I desire, to unlock fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. It is to share your bread with the hungry and to take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, to clothe him and not to ignore your own kin.
Okay, thank you. So according to the prophets, how do you get God's favor and protection? Somebody want to offer a summary there, quick?
Jerry, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to share?
Well, this has sounded familiar because if any of you heard my Hunger Project speech this morning, this is exactly the quote I use. One of the elements is it's not just what you believe, it's what you do. Feed the hungry, for example.
Right.
These are the ways that you please God.
A very good example. He's saying, look, you think that God wants you to be pious and bow down and fast. That's not what God wants. What God doesn't want you to starve yourself, but that you should feed people who are starving. So it's not about eating, it's about feeding. It's not about religious ritual, but social justice. This is the classic prophetic narrative that ritual obedience to God will not lead to God's blessings and good things happening, but rather morality and sensitivity to the weak. That's what leads to good things happening to you. Surrendering to God, worshiping, heaping praises upon him, that's not how you get your reward. You have to take care of the weakest among you. If you take care of the unprotected, that's what will work. Don't look up to God, look down to the weakest parts of society. So, what have they said about the basic concept of a reward system? of the Torah and the temple? Remember, the Torah sort of emphasized ritual. The prophets come along and say this. So what are they saying about the reward system?
Norma, feel free to unmute.
They're forming a contrast with the Torah act, with the other part of the Torah, by saying it's actually your actions that are going to count, not following a ritual, not what you say, not what you believe, but what you do.
Excellent. Well put. And important, the way you stated it and the way the prophet stated it, they're not rejecting a reward system. They're refining it. There's a covenant. It promises a reward, but the way to the reward is through moral and ethical living. He's criticizing that people who think that because they fast, all will go well with them. By the way, in the entire Jewish Bible, there are 929 chapters. There's only one chapter that criticizes people who fast. And that's the chapter that the rabbis picked for us to read on Yom Kippur. So the problem with the prophets is that, they're very critical and they stand up for what they believe, but they're naive about life. They've offered an alternative system. Take care of the poor and God will protect you. And then we come to the book of Job. Interestingly, the book of Job is almost not read by Jews. It's not part of our liturgical calendar. It's almost like it was censored. Don't read Job. And I want to just plant a seed in your mind. I don't know if anybody has an immediate response. I'll see if you do. But based on what you know about the book of Job, if you were going to design the calendar in such a way that there was a time during the year when we read the book of Job, when would you read the book of Job?
Tisha B'Av.
Tisha B'Av? Okay.
I would think.
Talk about really driving it home. What was it? I'm sorry, I missed the next one.
Oh, I would think all the time. It should be your daily, something you do all the time, not just Yom Kippur.
Okay. But it's not read on Yom Kippur.
Oh, okay.
So I'll tell you that a lot of I meant to say this at the very beginning. I'm so anxious to get through this. A lot of the thinking that lies behind this session today is from several sessions in which I've studied with the book with Micha Goodman, the tremendous Israeli philosopher. And he posed that question, where would you put it in the Jewish ritual calendar? And I'm just going to give you his answer now, and God willing, we'll get through it, and you'll see why he says this. His answer is, at the time of the service when we read the Ele Azkarah, the martyrdom of the rabbis at the hands of Rome. So we'll come back to that. Let's take a look at how Job fits into the Bible theologically. Remember, the Torah emphasizes rituals and worships to earn God's favor. The prophets say that's not it. Doing good will earn God's rewards. And then we come to the book of Job. Job says, really? If I worship and praise God, all will be well? If I take care of the poor, the widow, God will protect me? Job is a critique of the prophetic critique. So let's take a look at what we know about Job. And we're going to start by looking at Job, where am I here? 29, 7 through 21. So will somebody read that section? Maybe we could divide that between two readers.
Sure, we've got Dave Kuhn will go first, followed by Jay Rosenberg.
Okay, thank you. So Dave, read a chunk of the verses and then we'll turn it over.
All right, I'll take 7 through 14, which I think is half of it.
It's skipping ahead in the book, but we learn a lot about Job's character from this passage. Go ahead.
When I passed through the city gate, to take my seat in the square, young men saw me and hid. Elders rose and stood. Nobles held back their words. They clapped their hands to their mouths. The voices of princes were hushed. Their tongues stuck to their palates. The ear that heard me acclaimed me. The eye that saw commended me. For I saved the poor man who cried out, the orphan who had none to help him. I received the blessing of the lost. I gladdened the heart of the widow. I clothed myself in righteousness, and it robed me. Justice was my cloak and turban.
Okay, next.
I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I look into the case of the stranger.
Keep going.
I broke the jaws of the wrongdoer, and I wrestled prey from his teeth. I thought I would end my days with my family and be as long-lived as the phoenix, my roots reaching water and dew lying on my branches, my vigor refreshed, my bow ever new in my hand. Men would listen to me expectantly and wait for my counsel.
Okay, I'm going to scroll back up here a little bit. So could somebody, in a nutshell, quickly describe Job to me based on what we've just read?
I think he's a little arrogant. I mean, he's just saying, I'm the best. I did everything. And I've done it. And as a result of doing it, you really should commend me for doing it.
Okay. Anybody else? So he's described as a person who has taken care of the poor. In verse 14, he was it says he was justice was my cloak and my turban. He was a man of justice. Some commentators think, by the way, that he may have actually been a judge. He fights injustice. So he was the personification of the prophetic idea of what a person should be. So the prophets have said, the prophets have said, you know, your rituals won't protect you. And Job comes to say, doing justice won't protect you. So Job is a critique of the Bible, the entire Bible. He's saying the reward system does not work. The Bible makes a promise. If you're good, good things will happen. That promise is not fulfilled. Job did all the things that the prophet said that you should do, and God did not protect him. The prophet said there's a reward. Job challenges the entire concept of the reward system. Maybe there is no reward. So now we're going to go back to the beginning of the book, chapter 1. And there, I just want to read that one verse there. There was a man in the land of Uz named Job. That man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. One of the great words in here is tam, blameless. So one of the first things we learn is that Job is not a Jew. He's a Gentile from another country. So you have an entire biblical book teaching us wisdom and God's will through Job, a non-Jew. We have one of, quote unquote, their books in our book. The Bible turns the book of a Gentile into a sacred biblical text. We have, okay. So we've learned 4 things about Job in this opening passage. He's Tam, T-A-M, perfect. Also in the Bible, it means naive, but here it means, biblically rather, in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, but biblically it means perfect, morally perfect. He's yashar, he's straight, he stayed away from evil. This may balance some of the arrogance that somebody detected in the next text, because this is not Job speaking about Job. This is the narrator, and then we're going to find out God echoes the same language. He fears God. He never did anything wrong. By the way, no one else in the Bible is ever described this way, as this perfect, and it's a non-Jew. He's perfect. He has a perfect life. And then we get to one of the more bizarre scenes in the entire Bible. Satan and God meet, and this very weird conversation ensues between them. Somebody want to read verses 6 through 8.
Richard, will you read for us, please?
Yes. Verse 6. One day the divine beings presented themselves before the Lord, and the adversary came along with them. The Lord said to the adversary, "Where have you been?" The adversary answered the Lord, "I have been roaming all over the earth." The Lord said to the adversary, "Have you noticed my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil."
Okay, thank you. So not only does the narrator, as I said, speak of Job as perfect and straight, etc., God uses the exact same language to describe Job to Satan. Have you noticed my servant Job? There's no one like him on earth, a blameless, etc. So it's an interesting thing if you think about what is God doing? Why is he describing this way? We're not going to get into the word Satan or adversary or the devil, whatever it is. Why does he talk this way? It's almost like he's proud. He's saying, "Hey, did you see that guy Job? I got one. I finally got one right. After all the other sinners and everything, we got one that's really good." But Satan doesn't buy it. Satan says that he's perfect. Did we read that, by the way? I don't remember now. Did we? Where did we get to? You know what follows. I don't have the whole thing down here. Satan's a cynic. It's a classical cynicism about people that seem too good to be true. And he questions whether or not it's pure nature, it's his nature to be good, or, is he good circumstantially? Is he authentically good? And so there's one way to find out who's right. What happens if Job loses everything? So they devise this metaphysical experiment. The book opens with a bet between Satan and God. If Job stays good after all that's taken away from him, then God's right. And the crazy thing is that God agrees to this experiment. So you know what happens. Job loses everything. He was rich and he becomes poor. His 10 children are killed. A plague comes and attacks him and he becomes very sick. And then we get to verses 20 to 22. I'll read those. Job arose, tore his robe, cut off his hair, and threw himself on the ground and worshipped. He said, "Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away." Famous verse, we say that at funerals. "Blessed be the name of the Lord." For all that, Job did not sin, nor did he cast reproach on God. So his reaction, faith. God gives, God takes. So God won the bet. After all that happened to him, Job remains a good person. God was right. It is possible for someone to be authentically good. And here's a problem. We've solved a question about Job. We know he's good. But what kind of God would do something like that to Job? To prove that he can be good? So now the book begins to ask, maybe God is not good. And it is God who raised this question. You'll see in chapter 2, verse 3, the Lord said to the adversary, "Have you noticed my servant Job? There's no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil." This is after the experiment. He still keeps his integrity. "So you have incited me against him to destroy him for no good reason." Job is still Tom. He's still perfect after what we did to him. And then what he says is amazing. "You seduced me to do something to him." And the Hebrew word is chinam, for no good reason. This bad stuff happened to him chinam, for no good reason. This is so stunning that Rabbi Yochanan in the Talmud said, if the Tanakh itself didn't say this, we wouldn't be allowed to say it. Because it's like God is a person who's been enticed or seduced to do something wrong. Now, earlier in the first chapter in Job, Satan uses the same word. You may remember, he said, I'll show it to you. Verse 9, the adversary answered the Lord, does Job not have a good reason to fear God? What in the Hebrew, what he says is, do you think he's good chinam, for no good reason? So the Bible has now turned this around. Was Job good chinam? Yes, he was, for no good reason. And God was bad chinam, for no good reason. So the book has shifted the question. The first question was, can people be good? Now the question is God good? Now, the big bulk of the book is the conversations between Job and his three friends who come to console him for all his sufferings. So we don't have time to read this part of the story. It's most of the book, like I said, and you probably remember, do you remember, can somebody tell us, how does Job's friends try to argue with him or comfort him? It really starts out comforting and turns into an argument. Anybody have an idea of how Job's friends address his problems?
They said he must have sinned, and that's why this is all happening to him.
That's right. So their answer to the question, is God good, is yes. God, and God is not evil. So if bad, there's the logic. If bad things happen to you, then you must have done something wrong. So they blame him for the bad things that happened. Not only has Job now lost everything, but remember how we read about his status in society. He was a somebody. He was important. But he's lost his status in society because he's seen as a sinner, because everyone has seen what's happened to him and made the same assumption his friends did. He must be a bad person. But Job rejects their argument, and he rejects their theology through all of this argument, all these chapters. And he insists, I am good. Remember someone said he seems a little arrogant. Well, now you can imagine he's standing up for himself. I am good. And I only have one conclusion. God kills good people and bad people, and the reward system doesn't work. So you can take everything away from Job but his self-esteem. He does still believe in himself. So Job can be divided into three parts. The first short part is that we talked about, the conversation between Satan and God. And there Satan doesn't believe in God, and Satan doesn't believe in Job, but God does. And then you have the experiment. Then you have the second part of the book. The friends don't believe in Job, just like Satan didn't. But Job believes in Job, just like God did. So that's about 38 chapters. And we've ended it with a new question. Is God good? And Job wants to know the answer. He gets the answer in chapter 38 of the book. So, somebody want to read verses 1 through 6?
Can we call back on one of our earlier readers, maybe Felicity?
I'll read it.
Oh, thanks, Jay.
Yeah. Then the Lord replied to Job out of the tempest and said, who is this who darkens counsel, speaking without knowledge? Gird your loins like a man. I will ask, and you will inform me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Speak if you have understanding. Do you know who fixed its dimensions, or who measured it with a line? Onto what were its bases sunk? Who set its cornerstone?
Okay, thank you. So God appears to give all the answers. He says, who has such a strong opinion without knowing anything? You don't know enough to have an opinion. God says, then God turns around, I have a question for you. All through the book, Job has questions, and now God has one. And the chapter begins with God finally about to answer Job, and his answer is a question. So we've established that God is Jewish. And he says, where were you when I created everything? So what does that mean? What is God saying to him when he says, where were you when I did these cosmic things? What does that mean?
It sounds like to me that he's saying, you know, what do you have knowledge and understanding of how things are built, what the system is actually supposed to give or take or whatever.
Good, good. Anybody else?
Maybe he's saying it doesn't matter because I'm the one, and it's my relationship with you that is the major aspect of everything, and you just aren't hearing it.
Okay.
Who are you to question my actions?
Who are you to question me? Very good. Thank you. So God is saying, look, there is infinite intelligence invested in creation. The secrets of the cosmos are infinite, and human comprehension is finite. Therefore, you cannot understand cosmic secrets. You don't know how I created the cosmos, so you can't formulate a judgment about cosmic justice. And that is the classic philosophical, theological answer to this problem. It's a mystery. All monotheistic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, fall back on what Micah Goodman calls the big picture justice. There is justice in the big picture, but you only see part of the picture. And you have to accept that you're limited. You cannot form objective judgment. You can't say this is bad unless you have the full picture. But since we only have part of the picture, we can't create objective judgment. We're part of the cosmos, so we can't judge the cosmos. God affirms that there is a relationship between suffering and sin, but it's tenuous at best, and that our fate is not necessarily explainable by anything we do. And that mystery theology led the rabbis to say, it is beyond our ability, this is in the Mishnah, it is beyond our ability to explain the prosperity of the wicked or the suffering of the righteous. Okay, by the way, you may recall that Harold Kushner, when he thinks about what the bottom line is here about Job, is that when God says, you know, where were you when I did all of this, is he comes to a radically different interpretation. He says, God is saying, I can't control nature, so neither can you. So remember, his answer to why bad things happen to good people is not that it's a mystery, it's God doesn't control everything. God is not all powerful. So God doesn't really answer the question, he undermines the question. And now let's look at what Job's response to God is. And we see that as we get towards the end of the book, in chapter 40, verses 3 to 5.
I have a read, yeah, Jenna said she would read for us.
Good.
Job said in reply to the Lord, "See, I am of small worth. What can I answer you? I clap my hand to my mouth. I have spoken once and will not reply, twice and will do so no more."
Okay, so he submits. He gives in. I am nothing. I am air. Job accepts the big cosmic mystery answer. He accepts God's answer. But now the big question is, can you accept God's answer? And your answer to that question should be no. Why? Because you read the beginning of the book. You read chapters 1 and 2. You know why Job is suffering. There's no mystery about it. The answer is Job is suffering because God made a bet with Satan. Chinam. For no reason he is suffering. That was even God's word for it. Job is suffering chinam, for no reason. So you wonder, what was the writer thinking, that the reader would forget chapters 1 and 2 before they got to the end of the book? Or is the book doing something else here? So for us, when you think about this perspective of having read the beginning of the book and then getting towards the end, knowing why Job has suffered, it sounds ridiculous. It creates what's called irony. Irony is when the reader knows something that the hero doesn't know. The book doesn't just raise the big question, why do bad things happen to good people? It's really much more than that. The book mocks the normal answer to the question. It's a parody of that big picture theology. Job is suffering. He doesn't know why, but we do. The book is a parody, and God seems a little ridiculous to the readers of Job. And the book is designed that way because we know the truth about why Job suffers. The book told us. Now, we're all adults in this room. Life shows us, even before we read the book of Job, that the Bible's basic theology doesn't work. We know that you can't figure out why bad things happen to good people and the opposite. Job is a parody of this, the most classic answer to the big question about God's goodness, that there's a mystery, a limit to our understanding. It's ironic, and it's a parody of this classic philosophy. It's all based on the fact that we know the answer to Job's question. So the book of Job is saying, the Bible is saying, it's all a lie. The reward system doesn't work. So then you have to ask yourself, so what is this doing in the Bible? What it really poses is, what is the Bible? Maybe we need to understand it better, to rethink the Bible. The Bible has a theology, this reward system, but the critique of the theology, Job, is not an outside critique of the Bible, it's a critique within the Bible. The critique of our holy theology is part of our holy writings, scriptures. The critique of the holy theology is holy. The Bible offers us a thesis, and it canonizes the antithesis. So instead of the book of Job being considered radical in relation to the Bible and trying to have the Bible somehow soften the impact of the book by throwing up our hands and saying it's a mystery we can't understand, instead we use Job. We need to understand the Bible better to understand Job. Instead of trying to do that, let the book of Job help us understand the Bible. What does it mean that the book that criticizes the Bible is in the Bible? It means that the Bible is pluralistic and that it can accommodate ideas in tension. So for a moment, imagine the Bible without Job. It would mean that once you experience life and you know that the Bible's promise isn't true, you've matured theologically, you've grown up and matured, and as a result of the experiences which fly in the face of the biblical theology, you feel disconnected from the Bible. I've heard people tell me when they grew up and matured, they saw the world, they lost their faith. But by including Job in the Bible is saying even when you criticize the Bible, you're within the Bible. Criticizing the Bible is biblical. It keeps you within the Bible. So this turns around the idea that when you mature, you become too sophisticated for religion. The book of Job says that religion can grow and mature and become sophisticated. So if you imagine a world where the biblical promise worked, every time you did a mitzvah, you had more money in the bank. Every time you did something bad happened to you. In that world, is it possible for a person to be good? In that world, you're good because it serves you. There's a reward. So the only world where we have the possibility to be good, just to be good, is where we can be bad. Only in a world where the Bible doesn't work can we actually be good. There's a very strange story about the Baal Shem Tov, and I only remember the broadest contours of it. The Baal Shem Tov was once like going into a synagogue, and everybody was very upset and anxious because a young child lay dying. And the Baal Shem Tov prayed fervently from the depths of his heart to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, to God, please, God, save that child. In exchange, I will give up my right, my access to the world to come, to heaven. And his wish is granted, and the child is healthy. And what does the Baal Shem Tov do? He starts dancing. He rejoices. And the people say to him, how can you rejoice? You just lost Halam Haba. But what he gained was, this is what he says, is that now he knows that he can be good. That he will be good without consideration of the reward. His religion has matured. So according to Micha Goodman, the book of Job saved the Bible. If it didn't have Job, the Bible is naive and you'd outgrow it. The theology of reward is based on performing the rituals. That didn't work. Neither did the critique of the prophets. The Bible doesn't work. It doesn't fit into the world we live in. Job says to us, we know the Bible doesn't work in the real world, and that's also part of the Bible. The entire argument between Job and his friends is also an argument, are you allowed to criticize God? Friends of Job say over and over, your real sin, Job, is what you're doing right now. Your sin is not what led to the punishment. Your real sin is not accepting the punishment and justifying God. Then we get to chapter 13, and look what he says. I'm going to read verses 1 through 4. My eye has seen all this. My ear has heard and understood it. What you know, I know also. I am not less than you. Indeed, I would speak to the Almighty. I insist on arguing with God. But you invent lies. All of you are quacks. So Job is saying, I want to criticize God, and you are all lying. You know bad things happen to good people, but you're not willing to say it out loud. And then verses 6 through 9. Somewhere in that area. Hear my arguments. Listen to my pleading. Will you speak unjustly on God's behalf? Will you speak deceitfully for him? Will you be partial toward him? Will you plead God's cause? Will it go well when he examines you? Will you fool him as one fools men? So he's pleading with his friends. Listen to my critique of God. Are you going to lie to God about the world? What does God really want? That's what Job is asking. Does he want us to glorify him and speak the truth to him? Look at verse 9. You think you can deceive God, telling him that all is fine when you know it's not? God does not want us to heap false praise. He wants truth. Verse 16. In this too is my salvation, that no impious man can come into his presence. When it says impious man, the word is chanaf. Chanaf is a hypocrite, someone who offers false praise. That person cannot become before God. God doesn't want a hypocrite to come and say what they think God wants to hear. So in the discussion with his friends, two issues arise. Is God good? And are we allowed to say that God is not good? The friends say that being religious means praising God. Job says being religious is saying the truth to God. So who's correct? Friends. Somebody read the last verse there, chapter 42, verse 7.
Felicity, will you read that one for us, please?
Yes. After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz, the Temanite, I am incensed at you and your two friends, for you have not spoken the truth about me, as did my servant Job.
So after God tells Job the big story picture, he turns to this guy Eliphaz. That was the more dominant of the friends in conversation with Job. And he praises God through the entire book. and criticizes Job for criticizing God. And God says, I'm mad at you. You didn't speak correctly about Job. That's the word is in the text is nachon. Modern Hebrew is correctly, but biblically it means honestly or with integrity, authentically. Job spoke the truth about you, about me. You offered me phony compliments, untrue praise. So what does God want? Truth or praise? The answer of the book of Job is God wants our truth, not our praise. So Job is a critique of the critique. It's a critique of the answer to the critique. And the book makes the point that honesty, and this has always helped me remain a Jew in the modern world. Honesty is not something we have to sacrifice to be religious. It's something we have to express when we want to get close to God. So at the beginning, I asked, if we were to read Job as part of the yearly liturgical cycle, why would Micah read this at the Yom Kippur during the martyrology? And it's because Yom Kippur is the time we recognize that bad things happen to good people, like those 10 martyrs whose stories are told in the afternoon. And we can't understand why those good men had to suffer so horribly. It's the only holiday that recognizes a theology that is not naive, like a reward for being good or obedient. At that time and late on Yom Kippur, it's okay to speak the truth to God. It's a day of authenticity and truth. So there's another little tag there, but I would like to leave whatever time we have left to see what kinds of questions or comments anybody has about this. It's really, it was brand new stuff to me, and I just thought it was just magnificent. So I hope that you enjoyed it and really interested in any feedback or questions or comments, reactions.
Rabbi, I also want to call your attention. There have been some comments people are putting in the chat.
Yeah.
If you wanted to give those a quick scroll as well.
Oh, okay. So I go to the top there?
So Robin Nelson wrote, if we are truly created in God's image, are we good and honest, i.e., here we are at Yom Kippur. And Alex wrote, reminds me of some writings I read that the most important nature of our world and all its flaws is that it grants us the ability to make the choice to reach towards God. If everything was good or built on do X, get Y, then we would not really have choice, just biology at that point.
Yeah, you know, and something that's important to me as I try to, understand this crazy world we're living in now, like with the pandemic, I've done wondering, what is God's role in all of this? And is God behind all of this? And the truth is that, we have these big questions, and we would like to think that, that we can understand the world. And there's some things that we simply cannot understand, but yet we're left with this feeling of, God should be responsible for this world. And to acknowledge, I'm not going to say that I'm going to blame God. It is God's world that allowed this to happen. But it's very hard to have a sense of reward and punishment. There's nothing we can do to improve this, really, or to change the course of this other than, stay healthy and hygienic.
I see Sheldon Merrill. I've unmuted you.
Thank you. Hi, Michael. It's nice to see you.
Hi, Cantor. Good to see you.
I have a few things that come up to mind. What year do you think, I have a few questions, so I'll lay them all on the line. What year do you think the book of Job was written? The role of Satan always bothers me. And it's interesting in the opening, although Job, you say, is not Jewish, it says God says he is my servant. And lastly, the idea of dialogue with God. Moses spoke to God. Abraham spoke to God. So in terms of the year that this book was in, this concept of anyone speaking to God is an interesting to me.
Yeah, the Bible, interestingly, often uses non-Jews when it wants to make big universal points, because universalism is one of the themes in the Torah, and so I think it's very purposeful that Job is a non-Jew. I'm not good at remembering, a series of questions. What would be the next thing you'd like me to comment on, Cantor?
The role of Satan. I mean,
yeah,
we
thank you.
In our prayers for Hashkivenu.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Satan.
Where else does this Satan come in?
Yes, Satan is invented between the Book of Kings and the Book of Chronicles, and I'm not really good at biblical dating, as far as what those dates are. But we sense that in a crazy story where it's actually a very important story, and I wrote about it for the Times of San Diego, I think earlier in the summer. It's this story where King David, has sinned and done a terrible thing, and he's given a choice of punishments. And there are three choices, and they're all bad. So he decides to pick the plague. And within 3 days, we can relate, by the way, within 3 days, 70,000 people die of this plague. And when this story is retold in the Book of Chronicles, the Chronicles is kind of a commentary on the Book of Kings. Am I off now? Or can you hear me?
No, you're still there.
Oh, okay. All of a sudden I saw something else. By the time of the Book of Chronicles, Satan appears in there, and in the story, the plague is blamed on Satan. Like so it's probably written during the first exile, and they couldn't comprehend, they couldn't accept the concept that God would have been the one to send the plague. So they took this idea probably from somewhere else in the world of Satan. The other thing that I about the book of Job is that, since remember I said it's really a critique of the entire Bible. And Micha Goodman's technique is a very interesting one, because he thinks that the Bible is its best and first commentary on the Bible. So for example, he looks at the book of Deuteronomy as a commentary on the Torah, that Moses is actually the first commentator, and the book of Deuteronomy is his commentary on the book on the books of the Torah. I forgot where I was going with that, but so I don't know about the timing of it, but at the time that Job is questioning everything, is associated somehow with in the rest of the world, the world was breaking down. I think the Greek Empire was falling apart, and traditional structures and things were crumbling, and so there was a lot of doubt, and it's sort of in that milieu of doubt that the book of Job gets written. So I'm not good at years, dates.
Job became the patsy. When things were bad, they could blame it on Satan. The dialogue, the concept of a dialogue with God, of course. How does the Orthodox look at the book of Job? I mean, I love your commentary.
Yeah, thank you. I'll tell you, it's kind of painful to talk about this, because it brings up, there are some Orthodox that people, maybe for the titles, there are some people who buy this theology. If you buy into the theology of the mystery, that means that if something bad happens, there is a reason, you just can't understand it. So you can apply that in your own life. Like last time you sprained an ankle, what did you do wrong to deserve that? But then apply it to bigger things. Okay, the Holocaust. If you maintain that system, you have to say, God brought the Holocaust for a reason. We may not understand it, although the most extreme people in this theological way of thinking will say, because of our sins, God sent the Holocaust to punish us. On a lighter note, by the way, a story I didn't tell earlier, I once attended some lectures by a tremendous Talmudic scholar, very Orthodox, taught in an Orthodox organization. He told a story that once he and his wife had a series of bad things happen to him. He sprained an ankle, she broke her wrist, they got bad flu, a series of things happened. He's this big prestigious Talmud professor, and his next door neighbor comes over to him, knocks on the door, opens the door, and she says to him, and this is her way of comforting him, "Have you checked your mezuzahs lately?" What that means is, theologically, it means there has to be a reason why you and your wife have had this series of bad luck. And perhaps your mezuzahs have become soiled and you need to change the parchment inside of them so that these little things that have happened to you are kind of little punishments to get you to realize what you've done wrong.
Can I just say, Rabbi, that was a superb discussion and your view. I was always under the opinion that the Christian view of this was that it doesn't matter. Nothing matters except for the relationship that one has with God. And that the book of Job is really saying this is having to do, and that is all that matters. You have the faith in God, and that's it. And he'll do everything, the good and bad, wherever that falls. Is that your view of the? I mean, is that your understanding?
Absolutely. Although it's probably as problematic to say the Christian view as much as it is to say the Jewish view. Yeah. So you'd find a grand variety, but it is the view of again, it's the classic philosophical, theological, fundamentalist, orthodox response. Ultimately, is there is a mystery, and we cannot penetrate the mystery. As I recall, David Wolpe wrote a book that answered Harold Kushner. Wolpe rejected Kushner's willingness to give up on the idea that God was not all-powerful, and instead said, it's a mystery. God is the healer of broken hearts, blah, 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 and there is a mystery that you just cannot understand. And by the way, David Wolpe is very qualified to talk about suffering. He's had serious bouts of cancer more than once, and so he knows what he's talking about. But this is the most traditional response there is. Kushner's is kind of out there. It appeals to us because it makes a lot of sense to our minds, but so this is really a radical interpretation of this book.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, who is it?
Jeffrey Shane.
I'll introduce Jeff Shane. Jeff is literally, and in fact, actually he's my first friend. We've been friends since before we ever walked into a school.
It was a tremendous, lovely lecture. Thanks for including all of it. My question is, based on how you were talking about the Bible, do you personally as a rabbi believe in the reward system or social justice as the tenets of Judaism? The first two, and then.
Yeah, I think that the critique of ritual and the critique of ritual and social justice, neither one is actually a total rejection of the other. The ritual, I look at the ritual, again, this is not entirely original thinking. The rituals that we go through are the ways that we bind ourselves to our people, to our tradition, to our history, our families, our communities, and try to be a good, decent person. And then we get, then that is like a springboard to be operate in the world kind of universally, where we go out and want social good in the world, and we work for that. I think that a wholesome view of Judaism, of any religion, says that you do both. You're a patriotic member of the Jewish faith, and you do things that reinforce that, and you go out in the world and do good things. But you really shouldn't be, it shouldn't be a matter of the question of a reward or not. It should be that this is the way you find fulfillment and significance in life. And that's all I think that we can ultimately know.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
Anybody else? Well, I think we're at the time. This has been, by the way, exceedingly thrilling for me. Like I said, I don't know if I said it earlier to just a few people or publicly. I haven't taught for a year and a half. So I'm very grateful to Rabbi Navarez and the clergy, and boy, Eileen Tatro, she's the best. Thank you. Thank all of you.